We're going to talk a lot about intimacy and Tantra, especially around the concepts for men, because I've noticed that when it comes to Tantra and you talk to men, they have this funny, strange look that crosses their face. So yeah, we're going to get into this today. So I have the wonderful Dominique with me today. Do you find, as someone who vocally talks about sex in the public eye, that people then have an assumption about who you are as a person as well, because you talk about Tantra and these sorts of topics?
Most definitely. I think there's a thing a lot of times with Tantra, people will think that Tantra is just about being really wild. Actually, I changed some things within my life when I began my path with Tantra, because before Tantra, I was more like Samantha on Sex and the City. I was doing things for my ego and masculine energy and approaching sex and relationships like a man in a way. As I started to understand more about my sexual energy and the connection and intimacy that you can share, I started to have a better relationship with myself. Then I started to expect more how I show up in relationship, but also expect more from how my partner would show up in relationship. Also understanding I can't put on a body condom to protect myself for someone's bad energy. So I got a little woo-woo with that. So I just really want to be sure that if I'm sharing my most intimate space with someone, that they're worthy of sharing that space with me, that we're matched and in alignment. I've actually had periods of celibacy. I've most recently been celibate for about 1.5 years now. I ended a relationship and I was like, I'm just going to intentionally date myself. Thank goodness for tantric solo self-pleasure rituals and everything that I do. So I'm my own best lover. Someone really has to meet me from that space of being able to match my level of self-love and how I love myself and treat myself with respect. Those are some of the things. But a lot of people would think, oh, you must just be so carefree. I think I was actually a little more, maybe not carefree, maybe careless before Tantra came into my world. When I understood the power of my sexual energy and how I can create my world and my experiences with it, then I started being more aware and more intentional how I use it and direct it.
Yeah, it's a misconception that I experience a lot. People like, oh, you're into Tantra, so you just must be having sex all the time. Like, I used to go to a Tantra school in London, and I remember telling my friends, I was like, yeah, I can't hang out today. I'm going to Tantra school. And they were like, what do you guys do? Just have orgies every week? I remember one day just being like, yeah, that's what we do every week. Actually, most of Tantra school was doing yoga. And but there is this assumption that people who are into Tantra are just like sex mad, sex crazy. And what you said to me there is also the experience that I've experienced for myself, and also the people that I've met in the Tantric communities here in the UK, is actually through Tantra you start to become a bit more deliberate with sex. You're like, okay, this is far more powerful than just two people's body parts rubbing it together. This is like a cosmic explosion of energy that can like linger on in my energy for months or years afterwards. I need to be a bit more careful about who I'm actually entering in this extremely intimate energetic union with.
Most definitely. And I say, like, you probably heard this: sex, S, sacred, E, energy, and then exchange. You're exchanging energies with the person that you're allowing to share energy with.
We touched upon this just before we jumped on. Is like one of the things I see in Tantra spaces often is this reluctance for men to enter into Tantra, but not just Tantra, a reluctance to talk about sex in general. I was on a men's group and he ran a session that was around sex and intimacy. It was about 7 or 8 of us. And the organizer said normally he would have 3 or 4 times this number of people. But because of the topic, people are like, oh, no, I can't talk about this. What do you think it is about sex that men can be so afraid to enter into spaces that are sexual spaces, like in terms of talk about or sexually charged growth spaces?
Great question. What I've thought about this and given this a lot of consideration as well, especially when I run men's group programs. A lot of times men will be more comfortable working with me one-to-one because it's more private. It made me think about back to even high school times of locker room talk and going into college. And locker room talk is a lot of bragging. And even in high school, we know no one is good in bed. But even in high school, men are bragging about if they've had sex and they just think that they already know everything and that they don't even need to learn anything else. So I think the part of, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to be in front of other men and my peers and acknowledge that maybe I need to learn something more, or that I'm having challenges with either premature ejaculation or erectile dysfunction, I don't want to admit that to anyone. And so then they shy away from these conversations.
Yeah, it's that conditioning that we get as men, is that we should know how to do everything, right? And sex being this
Yes.
thing that we use as like for brownie points to talk about and boast about, to admit that we're not good at that thing, or we need help in the thing that, like, quote unquote, a lot of men see as like how they determine their masculinity by their sexual prowess. To go into a group and go, oh, I'm having some troubles, and have other men hear us and see us, is potentially like the deepest shame that we imagine we imagine as men will feel the deepest shame in being in that situation.
Yeah, that vulnerability can be so edgy. And it's so silly that we think that we should already know everything about sex. That's one thing that we don't get educated on properly. A lot of times it's about shame. Shaming, you should wait until you're married, or just how to prevent STDs or pregnancies. That's the education that we're receiving. Sex is so much deeper than that. It's not just a bunch of positions you see in Cosmopolitan magazine. That's the thing in our society. It's so much of this superficial sex. We can be with someone skin to skin and stay in the shallow waters, but can we dive in deep? Can we know how to make love to someone's soul? So we keep having these surface level interactions with one another in this really superficial sex where there's no intimacy, no eye contact, no depth. But then we want a soulmate. But if we don't know how to have soulful sex, we're not going to have a soulful relationship. It is soul mating. You literally can create soulmate type connections and relationships through tantric practices. But if we're just staying surface level and skin to skin and our ego is just running the show, then we don't even understand the power of what's really here for us. But it's not just shame anyone for not being educated. We just don't get educated. And our parents and their grandparents didn't get educated. Tantra practices are from over 5,000 years ago. This is very ancient wisdom. Then what happens is we'll go and look at adult videos so that we can learn what to do. But that's like trying to learn how to drive by watching the movie Fast and Furious. And a lot of the positions and techniques in there by men are fast and furious. And that's really not what women desire. They can think, we can start to think that's what we want because we're programmed. We're thinking, oh, if they're these stars of the show, they must be so good at it. But we forget that it's still acting. And then we're being dumbed down by what we can fully experience by saying, oh, I should be trying to do it like that because they're getting paid to do this. They are these stars in this. So we continue to be miseducated.
We forget it's entertainment. Our brains don't really know the difference between real and fake. And I could take it so far as like I did a VR experience the other day, and I had to walk across a very thin path of wood over a big drop. That was the VR, right? We would do it as part of this shoot 'em up game thing. And I literally struggled to walk, even though I knew in my mind, I knew consciously I'm in a room. I'm in this room that had lots of floor. But because what my brain was seeing was this narrow path, I was terrified of falling. And it was after that day, I was really like, wow, yeah, we have porn, this thing so accessible to watch. And we can see it whenever we want, right? We can just get our phones up and watch it. And it's like a slow programming of our brains of this is what sex is. This is how sex is. And we're all watching it, right? Men, women, and we watch from a young age. And it grooms us into this pathway of what sex looks like. It's a very narrow pathway in many ways because there is a tiny sliver of educational porn, but it's a very tiny, but it removes the real kind of deep and possible connection that's there for us.
It's really unfortunate because the brain is our largest sex organ. So with neuroplasticity and with Tantra, we're creating new, prolonged, different pleasure pathways through these practices. But what happens, we're seeing a higher and higher incidence in younger males having, because they start early on when they start self-pleasuring, they begin that journey with watching videos. Whereas back in the day, it might be if you got lucky, you got a still image from your dad's Playboy magazine, or you're looking at some lingerie from a catalog. And that's the still image that you're looking at. But whenever you're able to access videos right away, what's happening is you're getting this rapid fire sequence of the money shot. You get all this extra stimulation. Then if you're with a partner, especially if the lights are out, you're in a missionary position, you're not having all these provocative angles and perspectives that you're seeing, then you don't have that stimulation. Then all of a sudden your anatomy is, hold on, we're not going to be excited for this. Where's all the extra action we're used to? You start to be conditioned to need that excess or the very taboo stimulations. And then what happens there is if they end up having erectile dysfunction and they can't fully get hard, they'll feel ashamed of that. And they may not even tell their partner. A lot of times I will work with women and they just think their partners don't desire them anymore. And not being aware that it could be that they've had this dependence on the adult videos. And now they're having challenges with ED and they're too ashamed, again, men not wanting to ask for support or talk about their challenges. So then they just go more into relying on the adult videos and less with their partners. And then they start to drift apart. It just starts to get worse and cause more conflict in their relationship, because then the woman is feeling like, oh, they don't even desire me. They're feeling rejected. So there's a big disconnect that happens.
Yeah. And it's, as you say this, like I've worked with the man on the other side. I imagine you've worked with men on the other side as well. And my partner doesn't think I desire her. And I'm like, okay, do you? Yeah. Hell yeah. Okay, so are you initiating sex? Are you expressing a desire for your body and through your being towards her? And he's, no, I can't because I'm worried I won't be able to get it up, or I'm worried I'm going to come too quickly. And if I do that, she's going to get mad. And then we get into, has that happened? Has she got mad? Has that ever happened? And he's, no. And you're like, have you talked to her about it? No, I can't talk to her about it. No, she already thinks I don't desire her. She's going to, and I say all this for the reason of, we're back to vulnerability here, aren't we? Again, like it's this piece in that we're groomed in sex in a way that we're so scared of being seen. We're so scared of like making a mistake or not doing something right, that we create our reality so that our sex is actually not anywhere near what we'd like it to be.
I like how you said, it's the vulnerability piece, so much of it. And shame is our lowest vibration energetically. It even is lower than states of being in fear, hate. And so we're really disempowering ourselves when we stay stuck in these kind of in a shame spiral and in these cycles. And how can you come back? Because then again, like you said, they're having performance anxiety and they're putting all this extra pressure on themselves. And that continues to create that. And one thing, if you're having a lot of pressure and you're feeling stressed about it and anxious, we can hold a lot of tension in our bodies. And for males, the more tension you're holding in your body, the faster you will ejaculate. For females, the longer it takes for us to be orgasmic whenever we're holding a lot of tension in our body. That's why of the 3 tenets of Tantra with breath, sound, and movement, sound is so important, because sound is like a thief and it will steal the tension from your body. Especially if we're having someone in a relationship and they have small children in the home, they don't want to wake the kids or the kids to know what's happening in the bedroom, they will stop using sound. And I had a client recently that had a newborn baby and he'd been his wife over decades and he never had challenges with premature ejaculation. But now that they're trying to help the baby to stay asleep at night, they're being quieter. And all of a sudden he started having challenges with finishing too fast. I said, it's one, the stress of fatherhood is a big pressure on males. One. Then being quiet and not using the sound to moan really impacts you as well. So then he went to his studio, which was a soundproof room. I did some self-pleasure rituals and really moaned and saw how much longer he was able to last. It's really interesting how those things are connected, but we don't understand. That's also why meditation practices help, because they help with the brain and the neuroplasticity. The longer a male can meditate and stay in a meditative state, the longer he can last. The longer a female can stay in a meditative state, the easier she will climax. So it's really interesting how they're connected.
Yeah, I'm often recommending meditation to men in that way, because the way I see it, and interesting to see how you see it, is when we meditate, we're able to just be with what is. We're able to observe what is, right? Staying present, right? That's observing what is. And so many men I know and I speak to and I've worked with have really struggled with being present during sex. They're thinking about their washing. They start thinking about the porn they watched the other day, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like a thief. It really takes away from our experience. But as you said there, like when a man's able to stay present and in his meditation, he can bring that same capacity to his lovemaking, which allows him to stay with, how I see it is like staying with the intensity that he's feeling in his body, while also staying with his partner's intensity and the intensity of the moment.
I love that you had shared that as well. Because again, our presence is a gift. And so when someone can be deeply present, fully present with us, one, it will help the woman to relax and feel safer because you're going to deepen that connection because you're being fully there. Because women are very intuitive. We can sense when a man is physically there or it feels like they're just masturbating inside of our bodies and they're really not truly connecting. And then that can create more distance because then the woman is, why did I even need to be there? They could have just done that on their own. They weren't even paying attention to my needs or connecting to me, or I'm not even having the intimacy with them that I desire.